Rama Rama. Hare Hare. So in your the topic, Srila Prabhu, I've mentioned remembrance in the brackets of the Lord,
Yeah.
because that way people will know. So will keep your there we go. We are now live on YouTube. Great stuff. So welcome everyone, dear devotees, Hare Krishna and friends. Today we come together to discuss on the transcendental topic of what is the sword of remembrance of the Lord. This is from the Srimad Bhāgavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is a very important chapter where our Guru Maharaj, His Holiness Mahavishnu Goswami Maharaj, as well as Srila Prabhupada, laid a lot of emphasis on this particular chapter. Many of the devotees, grand disciples also, they know this chapter, the verses by heart of this particular chapter. So in that, today Shital Patil Prabhu would be giving us a class, and his topic of discussion is from the first canto, chapter 2, verse number 15. Now, do you want me to share it, or would you like to keep the sharing with you, Shital Prabhu?
You can share that, Prabhuji. That's not a problem.
All right. So once we, I'll just share in a few minutes once you start the program there. Yeah. So we'll just quickly do our prayers and then we can do our things. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnana Timirandhasya Gnananjana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Daivim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Nashta Praeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Jai Grantraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai, Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is ki Jai, Srila Gurudev ki Jai. What synonyms, translations and purport for Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Shri Nitai Gaur Chandra Premanande Hari Hari Bol. So very nice. So Shital Prabhu is our senior counselor. No longer is he a new devotee. He was a new devotee just yesterday, but now we've encouraged him to give classes as well, which he does so very nicely. He, along with his family, although they have got Vedic background, but not a Sanatan background there. They are Sanatan. Jain is Sanatan as well, isn't it? In some extent, but they are very much Vaishnavas now. Yes, they are very much so. So they are very much Vaishnavas now. So yeah, without further delay, I will hand over the platform and the microphone to Shital Prabhu. Please, Prabhuji, all yours.
Thank you, Prabhuji. So, first of all, I would like to thank His Grace Ambrish Prabhu and His Grace Purnimagya Mataji and His Grace Krishna Samarpan Krishna Prabhu for giving me opportunity to actually speak on this subject matter. Actually, I'm not any big pandit. Actually, I'm still very much very new learner in this subject matter. But actually, I will try to actually do my best to explain this from what I actually read from Srila Prabhupada's purports and what I have so far learned from Ambrish Prabhu's program. So, actually, yeah, I will start with actually Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, verse 15. As Prabhuji explained, this is very important chapter. And all the verses given in this chapter are very instructive, and they form the very basis of the actually pure devotional service. So actually I found this verse very relevant in actually in today's actually where we actually try to become a devotees, and as we are still attached to these material things. So actually I would start with the actually verse, and if you want you can actually recite after me. Yad anudhyasina yukta karma granti nibandhanam chindanti kovidas tasya ko na kuryat katharatim yad anudhyasina yukta karma granti nibandanam chindanti kovidasatasya ko na kuryat katharatim yad anudhyasina yukta karma granti nibandanam chindanti kovidasitasya ko na kuryat katharatim. For word to word synonyms, translation and purport, Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada Ji ki jai. Yat, which, anudhya, remembrance, asina, sword, yuktaha, being equipped with, karm, reactionary work, granthi, knot, nibandhanam, internet, chindanti, cut, kovidaha, intelligent, tasya, his, kaha, who, na, not, kuryat, shall do, katha, messages, ratim, attention. So, which remembrance sword being equipped with reactionary work, not internet, cut, intelligent, his, who not shall do, messages, attention. So, translation, with the sword in hand, intelligent men cut through the binding knots of reactionary work, that is karma, by remembering the personality of Godhead. Therefore, who will not pay attention to his message. With sword in hand, intelligent men cut through the binding knots of reactionary work, karma, by remembering the personality of Godhead. Therefore, who will not pay attention to his message. Purport. Okay, just. The contact of spiritual spark with material elements creates a knot which must be cut if one wants to be liberated from the actions and reactions of fruitive work. Liberation means freedom from the cycle of reactionary work. This liberation automatically follows for one who constantly remembers transcendental pastimes of personality of Godhead. This is because all the activities of Supreme Lord, his Leela, are transcendental to the modes of material energy. They are all attractive spiritual activities, and therefore constant association with the spiritual activities of the Supreme Lord gradually spiritualizes the conditioned soul and ultimately severs the knot of material bondage. Liberation from material bondage is therefore a byproduct of devotional service. Attainment of spiritual knowledge is not sufficient to ensure liberation. Such knowledge must be overcoated with devotional service so that ultimately the devotional service alone predominates. Then liberation is made possible. Even the reactionary work of fruitive workers can lead one to liberation when it is overcoated with devotional service. Karma overcoated with devotional service is called Karma Yoga. Similarly, empirical knowledge overcoated with devotional service is called Jnana Yoga. But pure Bhakti Yoga is independent of such karma and Jnana because it alone can not only endow one with liberation from conditioned life but also award one the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Therefore, any sensible man who is above the average man with a poor fund of knowledge must constantly remember the personality of Godhead by hearing about him, by glorifying him, by remembering him, and by worshipping him always without cessation. This is a perfect way of devotional service. The Goswamis of Vrindavan, who were authorized by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to preach the Bhakti cult, rigidly followed this rule and made immense literatures of transcendental science for our benefit. They have chalked out ways for all classes of men in terms of the different castes and orders of the orders of life in pursuance of the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam and similar other authoritative scriptures. Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ji ki Jai. So this was actually talking about actually the way how we can actually able to cut the knots. So knots here actually refers to our attachment in this material world to these actually material things. So every attachment that we have in this material world forms a knot. So as we all know, actually, as we take birth in this material world, so basically, we actually fall down from the spiritual world into this material world. So we actually rebelled against Krishna in material world, and we want to actually enjoy like a Krishna, because by our constitutional position, we are the eternal servants of Krishna. But in the spiritual world, actually, when this false ego comes in, where we actually want to enjoy like Krishna, so basically we want to experience how it is to be like a God, then that's when actually we fall down, where Krishna actually created this material world, where he allows the actually the individual souls to actually, to play or actually experience, actually to enjoy their senses. So when we actually take birth in this material world, then actually we are also under the influence of there are three modes of material nature. So the goodness, three modes of material nature. So that is, so once we are under these modes, so actually we get actually bind as we do different activities in this material world. So we get actually entangled or bind by these material activities. So Bhagavad Gita talks about actually this karma. So every action that we perform, there is an equal and opposite reaction, and that actually binds us in this material world, and that's how we actually go through this repetitive cycle of birth and death. So so actually when we try to enjoy our senses here, actually we try to gratify our senses, actually we are actually building, for every desire, actually there is actually, as Guru Maharaj says, for every material desire that we have in heart, actually there is another body ready for us in your next life. So all our activities that are directed to satisfy our own senses actually binding us in this material world. So, and that is what is actually referred here as a knot, and it's a very strong knot. So Srila Prabhupada actually describes that it's not easy to cut this knot down, unless one actually takes the path of this actually devotional service. So the prime thing in this material world, the beginning of this knot is the actually sex life, So as we know, actually the sex life in this material world is the highest form of pleasure. So as we know, actually there is a very nice reference given in actually previous verses where actually Srila Prabhupada talks about this power, pa pa ba ba ma. So where Srila Prabhupada describes the actually materialistic men as they work in this material world, they work very hard, They work so hard that actually foam comes out of their mouth, They still keep working hard because they want to earn money, and the money they earn, they use it to satisfy their senses. They want to satisfy their senses. They want to enjoy the sex life, and that's how one actually gets very much entangled in this material world. So the solution given here, how to actually cut down this verse. So here's translation says, with the sword in hand, intelligent men cut through the binding knots of reactionary work, that is karma, by remembering the personality of Godhead. So you can actually cut down the knot the process given here is actually the remembrance of Krishna, or the knowledge of Bhakti Yoga process. So that is what is referring here. So by remembering Krishna, is only possible to actually cut down these knots, and that's how we can able to actually release us from this repetitive cycle of birth and death. So as Srila Prabhupada very nicely explained in his purport, that actually when we are in this material world, our hands, and legs are there tied by the laws of this material nature, because we have to act according to the rules and regulations that is set out by the material nature. So if one commits, any offense, so there are actually, to give the example where Srila Prabhupada talks about actually in this material world, there are actually civil laws and there are actually criminal laws. So if one actually violates the civil laws, there is a punishment. But that punishment is not very severe as compared to one when he violates the criminal law. So if he commit any sin, which is actually severe crime, then the punishment that he get is very severe. Whereas by violating the civil laws, the punishment is less severe, but punishment is still there. So that's why actually, if we want to actually liberate ourselves, that's how actually we bound up by this laws of material nature. So we need to actually take the help of one who is unbound, one who is liberated. So only a person whose hands and legs are not bound can able to help us. So we can actually liberate ourselves. So that person where actually the liberated person, so that exactly we talks about our actually guru, we have to approach the spiritual master, because he is a self-realized soul, and he has actually realized the ultimate instruction of the shastras, and one who can actually able to implement those in practical life and show the general mass of people by his example, how to actually follow in the footsteps of the actually great acharyas. And when we do that, so that is actually ultimate weapon that we can able to actually we liberate ourselves from this knot of actually karmic reactions. So I was meditating on this point, means when we are in this material world, actually the first thing, because as we are under the modes of this material nature, and Krishna talks about this in one of the famous verse in Bhagavad Gita. Actually, I'll just refer to that. Bhagavad Gita verse 7.14. Daivi hi esha gunmayi, Daivi hi esha gunmayi, mama maya durattaya, mama eva e prapadante, mayamitam tarantite. This divine energy of mind, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome. But those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. So Krishna here, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has innumerable energies, and all these energies are divine. Although living entities are part of his energies are therefore divine, but due to contact with material energy, their original superpower is covered. Being thus covered by material energy, one cannot possibly overcome its influence. As previously stated, both material and spiritual natures, being emanation from Supreme Personality of Godhead, are eternal, and the living entities belong to the eternal superior nature of Lord, but due to contamination by inferior nature, their illusion is also eternal. So this is shortly actually described, the how the living entities in material nature are eternally under the influence of this illusion, or what we call Maya. So I can give to just give an example is actually the life of a hog. So we all know the hog. So he actually in this when one actually gets the body of a hog, he actually his life is very much abominable. He eats the stool, and he has the rampant sex life. He can have sex with anyone of his, there is no distinction if he actually the opposite hog is his mother or sister or anything. So there is no self-control at all. So that hog's life is very abominable. But we know that actually it is abominable. But for the hog, he still thinks that actually he is quite fine in his position. He's quite happy. So actually he doesn't realize his position, but we realize because we are actually have the better body. Human life is actually is higher than hog's life. So we have more, we have better intelligence to actually distinguish these things. So there is a very nice pastimes. Actually, Srila Prabhupada shared this. Actually the king of the heavenly planets, Indra, once he was cursed, and he cursed to become a hog. And actually he became a hog, and actually then after he became a hog, he has his wife, he has his piglets, many of them. And he was actually enjoying all this, not realizing that actually he was suffering to a great extent. But actually means he was actually in his previous life, he was King Indra, the king of heavenly planets. And as we know, in heavenly planets, the facilities and of sense enjoyment are much higher, greater, and the miseries are much lesser as compared to earthly planets. But still, as he has actually born into the body of hog, he didn't realize that he is under the illusion of the Maya. So Brahma, looking at all this position, at his position, and at the same time, because of his absence in actually heavenly planets, the management of the heavenly planets was not going very well. So he approached Lord Indra and actually requested him to come back. But the hog, Indra in the body of hog, he didn't realize that. He said, "What are you talking about? Which heavenly planets? I don't know any heavenly planets. I'm quite happy. See, here is my wife, here is my piglets, and I'm enjoying, I'm having this nice food up stool, this very nice position to be in, and he don't want to leave." So it's quite gross example, but our position is not very different from the example given here, the hog's life. So we are actually born as a human. And one of the main objective or the aim of life for human being is to become a self-control and ultimately become actually Krishna conscious. So that is ultimate aim of the human life. But because we are under the illusion of this Maya, three modes of material nature, So Prabhupada talks about this. Actually, there are two energies of Maya. First is our Natmika Shakti, and second is Prakshepatmika Shakti. So our Natmika Shakti actually puts living entity under the illusion. So for example, what we describe here, the hog, he's actually kept under the illusion, so he does not recognize his real position. He does not recognize that he is suffering here. So, and even he's suffering, he still thinks that he's doing all right. He do not want to leave his position. So, and Prakshepatmika Shakti. So that actually what it does, that it throws living entity in the ocean of material world. So when we say the ocean of material world is actually, it's very hard to cross, for a living entity, and we cannot do that on our own. We need a help of spiritual master and Krishna to cross beyond this ocean of material existence. So thinking on this point, actually, we are in this material world, and now fortunately we actually came in contact with Srila Prabhupada's message, and Amrish Prabhu actually training us in this bhakti yoga process. But still, when we preach, we go and preach to new devotees, or somebody actually, Amrish Prabhu preached me, Avinash Prabhu preached me all the time. But initially, it's very hard for us, So they actually give us give these teachings, of bhakti yoga process, that we are actually living entities, and we are part and parcel of the soul. And actually, our real position is to serve the God. But it's very hard for us to accept that initially because we are under the illusion. And even actually, they try to take us to the right path. We still rebel. We do not accept that. We think, what is this Krishna conscious movement? This is all this just nonsense. And there are so many restrictions. Don't eat this, don't eat that. You cannot eat chocolate. You cannot eat onion, garlic. You cannot drink. You cannot smoke. You cannot watch this and that. So many restrictions. So that's how this illusion is working on us. We think that actually by following this process, so we think that following by this process, we're actually going to suffer more. So that is actually our real position. We are under this actually illusion. And this, what I describe here is Prakshitmatmika Shakti, that is what dictates here, So Srila Prabhupada actually very nicely explained, when one try to become a Krishna conscious, so this is what this Shakti is actually preventing the living entity to actually become Krishna conscious, So actually this means basically we're talking about a Maya here, So if one is more sinful, harder it becomes for him to become Krishna conscious, So Maya Devi is actually checking, what is this soul is doing here? He is trying to become Krishna conscious. So she creates more hurdles, so he's punishing that soul because it is more sinful. So by punishing, she tried to actually rectify that soul, by actually, so when we go through all these miseries, then we realize that we actually suffering, Then when we realize we are suffering, then we're ready to take a help. So, but until that point, we think we are all right, So we do not want to accept the help of the devotees. So that is our real position. So even actually devotees are actually going around and preaching to many people, but these people are not ready to accept the instructions, and they are actually suffering on account of their own misdeeds or karmic reactions, So this is what is called karma bandhan or knots, and these knots are very strong. So if one has to break this knot, then one has to take the shelter of holy name or this bhakti yoga process. There is no any other option. So as the translation says here, sorry, I lost the page. With the sword in hand, the intelligent men cut through binding knots of reactionary work. So the word mentioned here is COVID. COVID means intelligent. The intelligent men can able to cut through the binding knots of reactionary work. So who are the intelligent men? So one who understands his position, one who actually realizes, who he is and why he is suffering in this material world. So Srila Prabhupada actually gave this nice example. Ms. Amrish Bhu also shared that example before. In this material world, there are many contradictions, So there are many marketing companies, who actually advertise, different products. For example, cigarettes, So they advertise cigarettes and they actually, the way they actually put forward this message, somebody is smoking and they actually giving the message that smoking is cool, So Srila Prabhupada actually explaining that means is actually rascaldom, The person is actually smoking the fire, He's taking the fire in his mouth and and they're actually telling you that is cool. But actually the unintelligent people, the people still fall prey to this advertisement, and they actually follow what is being advertised and they start smoking. So that is not very intelligent. If somebody is intelligent, then he can actually see this contradiction immediately, So in this material world, as we are actually going through our life, So we are always under the influence of Maya. And as Krishna says, actually it's very hard to actually cross over these three modes of material nature. So Maya Devi, actually, she's offering various allurement to these living entities to keep them under illusion all the time. So this is a big examination we have to actually go through. So if you are actually intelligent, you will see contradictions in all the allurements offered by this Maya Devi. So that is actually a real intelligent person. So unless we take the instructions given in Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhāgavatam and we realize it and implement it, we are not really intelligent. Otherwise, as Srila Prabhupada gave the example of Sanatan Goswami. He was a very big minister in his time, and actually when he taken to the process of Bhakti Yoga, so they are the direct disciple of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he actually spoke to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that actually the general mass of people, they see him as a big Pandit because, he is such a big minister and he knows little bit of Sanskrit and little bit of Arabic, and they call him very learned Pandit. But he says that actually, I don't know, frankly speaking, I don't know who am I, and why I'm suffering in this material world. So that is intelligent person, Srila Prabhupada called. He is actually a very intelligent person. So he must ask these questions. So unless one asks these questions, he's not going to actually understand his real position. And that is what is actually referred here as intelligent person. So as we see, the animals, we see animals and they are not very self-controlled as compared to the human being. So as soon as there is a dog or cat, as soon as he sees the opposite sex, they actually want to have a sex, otherwise they forcefully have a sex with the opposite party. So there is no control, but human being, actually, they normally don't do this, even if they see the female, they don't actually go and try to have a sex by forcefully. I mean, there are always exceptions. There are criminals, who do that, but general mass of people will not do this. So they know actually this is wrong thing and they will not actually do this. So they try to control themselves. So that is human being. So human life is actually mean for actually is very self-controlled life. So unless you have control your activities in this material nature, you're not really human being. And this is very important, to actually act according to, what is we have to actually control ourselves. We have to control our senses. So that is very important because we are always under illusion. As it says, the living entities, they are eternally under illusion. So by realizing this fact, one has to be very careful and one has to actually take the instruction given in this verse, where it is called as actually weapon, the sword of remembrance. So the only the actually remembrance of Krishna can able to actually uh, liberate us from this actually karmic reactions or knots of these karmic activities. So as Srila Prabhupada described here, he talks about Karma Yoga, he talks about Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. So the Karma Yoga, actually, as he described, when the actually fruity activities they are quoted with devotional service, then it is called Karma Yoga, and that can lead one to the stage of liberation as well. So even we are actually engaged in these productive activities, we are actually going, we're actually continue our life, actually earning things, we are attached to our properties, money, whatever possession we have. But if we actually engage the resources that we have in the service of Krishna, so that is what we call Yukta Vairagya, So that will actually help us to purify our existence and that can able to lead one to the liberation as well. So the same goes with the Jnana Yoga as well. But the Bhakti Yoga process is quite independent. So as it is actually described by actually following the path of Bhakti Yoga, this liberation is a side product, is a byproduct. So there is no doubt that actually one who follows, one who devotes his life serving Krishna constantly, without having any material motives, and one who does this constantly without any interruption, then actually Krishna will give him intelligence. As it is stated in Bhagavad Gita seed verse 10.10, Tesham sataduyuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogantam yenamamu piyantite. So actually Krishna is very kind, Actually Krishna is fulfilling everybody's wish, If one want to become actually, one want to eat meat, become like a tiger, so he gives the body of tiger, If one want to eat stool and become like a hog, he gives the body of a hog. And if one want to become actually someone like a demigod, then he gives the body of demigods as well. So there's a Bhagavad Gita verse 9.25. Yanti devavrata devan pitram yanti pitravrataha bhutani yanti bhuteja yanti mam yajino apimam. Those who worship demigods will take birth among the demigods. Those who worship ghosts and spirits will take birth among such beings. Those who worship ancestors go to the ancestors, and those who worship me will live with me. So it's very clearly explained in this verse, So where you want to focus your effort. So as we actually try to follow the process given by Srila Prabhupada, so that is basically Bhakti Yoga process. So by following that process, once we realize who we are, our real position, and we know that actually by following the Bhakti Yoga process, actually one can go back to Godhead, and can become eternally happy. Still, it's very hard for us to follow this process, We will always come back with arguments or, explanations or excuses, we are too busy, actually it's not possible, if you actually ask somebody to chant, it's very hard for them, it's very hard to convince them to chant even one round. So what I realized is actually this is nothing but actually different knots, that we have created by ourselves. And to cut this knot is not very easy, But if we actually take to this path of Bhakti Yoga, it become easier. So when I started in this actually Krishna conscious movement, and for anyone, actually the first thing they tell them is to just add Krishna, they do not change anything. And, slowly things will fall in place. So when I actually heard that, then initially I wondered, how is it possible, just by adding Krishna, the things will fall in place. But once you start chanting, as you start chanting, then slowly, all these abominable things will go away, So if you're eating onion, garlic, you're eating meat, you're smoking, drinking, so slowly, all these things will actually go away, and you come closer and closer to actually becoming a human, The becoming devotee is still long away. So first we become a human, we try to actually control our senses, become a self-control. And as we become self-control, then we actually come to the platform where we can actually, at least begin our bhakti, it's a Mishran bhakti initially, but we can actually start in this process. And as we get purified, means people who already started chanting, you can see, they see the difference, their life become very sublime, and they already actually, the level of anxiety will go down as well. So this is a process, that is a proof that what is given here, what they called is sword, the remembrance of Krishna is very powerful. So if we follow this process, then there is actually assurance given by Krishna is that actually one can actually elevate themselves to the actually transcendental platform of Brahma Bhuta stage, where they can actually render the pure devotional service. And when they do that, actually they will actually blissful, eternally blissful. And that pleasure is ever increasing. So process is given here. All we have to do is become intelligent. The COVID, what is mentioned here. One has to become an intelligent person. So Srila Prabhupada says that actually all the instruction are given here. And he says that it doesn't take too long to become Krishna conscious, For somebody who is very sincere and serious about this process, they can become Krishna conscious within a second, it doesn't take too long. But one who is not sufficiently intelligent, it might take millions and millions of years. You have to go through different species of life. The evolutionary process that is given. So that one has to follow, because these knots, these karmic reactions, and the knots is very strong, and these knots of karmic reaction will force one to actually transmigrate from one body to another. So depending how you behaved in this life, your next life will be determined. So basically you are creating your own bodies where you want to go. So actually, if you are really intelligent, then actually one should understand this message of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. And we have to be very serious and actually take this weapon of remembrance of Krishna. As Prabhupada says, the best way to remember Krishna is actually chant the Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So this is very powerful mantra. Actually, when we start chanting, we do not realize the importance. But actually, as we go through this process, slowly, you will realize its power. So that's why it is actually that's why it is the analogy given here for remembrance of Krishna is a sword. And we have to actually sharpen this sword by actually following the instruction, by regular study and actually implementation of instructions. That's how we sharpen this sword, so we can actually able to cut through all these knots of this material entanglement. Secondly, actually, Srila Prabhupada also emphasized on the point where he talks about actually one has to actually understand God, in a truth, where so we have to follow the process given here by Srila Prabhupada. And as I spoke, the remembrance of Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada talks, actually there are 9 processes that's recommended here by which one can actually become a pure devotee. So the process given here is Shavanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam Pada Sevanam Arshanam Vandanam Dasyam Sakyam Atmanivedanam. So this is actually verse reference from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 5, verse 23 to 24, where Prahlad Maharaj actually explained in the translation, said, hearing chanting about the transcendental holy name, forms, qualities, paraphernalia, and pastimes of Lord Vishnu, remembering them, serving the lotus feet of the Lord, offering the Lord respectful worship with 16 types of paraphernalia, offering prayers to Lord, becoming his servant, considering the Lord one's best friend, and surrendering everything unto him. In other words, serving him with the body, mind, and words. These 9 processes are accepted as a pure devotional service. One who has dedicated his life to the service of Krishna through these 9 methods should be understood to be the most learned person, for he has acquired complete knowledge. So these 9 processes of actually bhakti, even if one perfect one, he still can able to actually go back to Godhead. And one who has perfected, so there is a great example in Srimad Bhagavatam of Ambrish Maharaj, who has actually perfected all these 9 processes, So he is a pure devotee of the Lord. So actually one can become really learned and intelligent, So the process is given here, instruction are given here. And with this actually sword of knowledge or sword of remembrance, So all these 9 processes actually will engage one in the service of the Lord, So there is if you follow all this, you will be actually engaged 24/7, So you will have the remembrance of Krishna 24/7. So that's how one can able to actually able to cut through this knot of karmic reactions, and one can able to liberate himself from this material world, where he can actually able to uh, serve, on that pure transcendental platform, and can able to go back to Godhead. So there is actually, I was thinking, so there is a lot of emphasis, the whole Krishna conscious movement actually focuses on this single point, that, as everybody knows, Vrindavan is nothing but the remembrance of Krishna. So we should not have any excuses to chant Krishna's name. So I think there is very nice mellow, we discussed that in previous class as well, where actually this is by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So I would like to just read that. Chant anyway, the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, So it's very nicely explained. Your mind is wandering all over the universe when you chant. Chant anyway. Your mind is wandering to the past and future when you chant. Chant anyway. You are not able to concentrate on Krishna's names while you chant. Chant anyway. You have no taste for chanting. Chant anyway. You have lusty desires. Chant anyway. You are making offenses in chanting. Chant anyway. You are not praying to Krishna to help you chant better. Chant anyway. You often chant late at night. So chant anyway. So why? Why should you chant despite all the above obstacles? So this is why. There is no vow like chanting the holy name, no knowledge superior to it, no meditation which comes anywhere near it, and it gives the highest result. No penance is equal to it, and nothing is as potent or powerful as the holy name. Chanting is the greatest act of piety and the supreme refuge. Even the words of the Vedas do not possess sufficient power to describe its magnitude. Chanting is the highest path to liberation, peace, and eternal life. It's the pinnacle of devotion, the heart's joyous proclivity and attraction, and the base form of remembrance of the Supreme Lord. The holy name has appeared solely for the benefit of living entities as their Lord and Master, their supreme worshipful object, and their spiritual guide and mentor. Whoever continuously chant Lord Krishna's holy name, even in his sleep, can easily realize that the name is direct manifestation of Krishna himself, in spite of the influences of Kali Yuga. Bhaktivinoda Thakur Sharnagati, So this is very actually powerful instruction actually, and it actually highlights the importance of chanting, So as a devotees, we sometimes take chanting very lightly. It becomes a routine, But one should understand actually its ultimate weapon to cut, your knots and free yourself from this material world. So do not take that lightly. And Srimad Bhagavatam also, there is a very nice word where it actually says it is impossible to overestimate the power of chanting. So when it says it's impossible to overestimate, you cannot overestimate the importance of actually holy mantra, Hare Krishna Mahamantra, So it's very important in this Kali Yuga, especially as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu actually preached, it's a Yug Dharma. So this verse actually focuses on the same point, somehow, through devotional service, so chanting, we have to engage ourselves so we can have this remembrance constantly. So the word actually in this verse given, the anudhyasina, So Srila Prabhupada explained that very nicely as well. So the word Anu means actually following, So we know Anusharan. There is Anukaran as well, but there is Anusharan. So Anusharan is important, For children, is Anukaran is fine, They can actually they see and learn. But for us, we have to take the actually shelter. And when we say we have to take the shelter, then we have to take the shelter of the actually bona fide spiritual master. And Anu is also mean constantly. We have to remember Krishna constantly. So Asina means sword, So this is very important verse, Anu Dhyasina. So Srila Prabhupada says that actually one has to actually find out the bona fide spiritual master, and it is very important because, if you are not actually truthful, then you will always find a bogus guru. So Srila Prabhupada gave the reference of this verse, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 3, verse 21. Tasmad gurum prapadate jignashu sheya uttamam shabde paresha nishnatam brahmani upa samshayam. A person who is seriously desire real happiness must seek out bona fide spiritual master and take shelter of him by initiation. The qualification of bona fide guru is that he has realized the conclusions of scriptures by deliberation and is able to convince others of these nice conclusions. Such great personalities who have taken shelter of Supreme Godhead, leaving aside all material considerations, should be understood to be bona fide spiritual masters. So, one has to be very sincere and truthful because, Krishna is actually absolute truth. The another name of Krishna is absolute truth. And unless you are actually completely truthful, you cannot receive the favor of Krishna, So that means hypocrites, they never receive the mercy of Krishna. So that is very clearly mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam as well. So even actually means we're talking about actually even one who is actually going, following this path of Bhakti Yoga. So this verse is very important. I found it actually very instructive as well. And as I meditate more and more, so we realize that actually how much we are attached, how many knots we got, So there is a lot to learn. So for even for the actually devotees who are following this path, sometime because as we are actually soul under the influence of Maya, we're always under illusion. We do not sometimes recognize, what knots we have got. So sometime actually, people are still attached to the chocolates, some is attached to the mushrooms and so on. Even actually they're following this Bhakti Yoga process. So these are all nothing but the attachments, the knots. So one has to realize this point actually, and actually one has to actually meditate on this instruction that actually more and more we detach ourselves from these material activities. Better it is for us to actually progress in devotional service. So that is what I actually realized from this verse. The first thing is actually means everybody knows the constant remembrance of Krishna. So that is through actually your scriptural study, and no doubt chanting is most important. But also one has to realize that actually one has to find ourselves what knots we have got, So the translation itself says, who will not pay attention to this message, So I was actually thinking about that point, So one who is unintelligent, one who is under the influence of Maya, So the people who are attached, they will always ignore this message. So actually that means we are acting like a hog, We are happy in our own condition. We know that is abominable, but we don't realize it. So actually it's very simple example, but actually it's quite instructive, whatever position we are, we have to realize our actually exact position and try to change ourselves. So that is what I realize. And yeah, thank you very much for actually, bearing with me. And yeah, if you have any questions, actually you're free to ask now. Hare Krishna.
Yes, please feel free if you have any questions, please.
Thank you, Shital Prabhu, for your wonderful class. You are touching a lot of concepts in Krishna consciousness. Well, the one word you said is Kovidaha. So I got confused. Are you talking about COVID-19? So Kovidaha means intelligent. But
Yes.
anyway, jokes apart, Prabhu, you talks about cutting those karma granthi by remembering Krishna. As we discussed last time in our class, that even remembering is not in our control. But at least we can desire to chant. So that's how we can remember. So, what are these karma granthi, Prabhu? What this karma granthi which you are trying to? That's some gross and some subtle karma granthi which you are trying to cut through with sword.
So there's a gross level Prabhuji, then as we say, there are actually gross level our attachment to this actually materialistic things, So we have actually desire to enjoy, different kind of foods, We want to enjoy chocolate, we want to enjoy, It's very hard to give up onion, garlic in initial stages. So that is very gross level, we are very attached and very hard to actually give up. But if you actually think on a very subtle level, then that could be, actually mental austerity is very important, So as you actually become more and more actually advance yourself on this path, then our focus will be to actually cut those knots of actually envy, So even as a devotees, we are actually very envious by our nature, I'm not talking about everyone. Actually, they are very nice, pure devotees. But somebody like me, initial, is actually, we have all the inebrities, We're envious, we're attached to actually our material possessions, So being actually, even some people are very critical as well, Some people will knowingly create disturbance in somebody's life, As even as Guru Maharaj says that talking behind the back, is not the quality of a devotee. So on that actually subtle level, means actually we have to purify our mental, concoctions, Otherwise, we will always be actually struggling with this Maya, So as say, Maya Devi is always testing us, You want to become a devotee, but, we have committed so many offenses, previous lives or, the misdeeds. So we have to actually suffer, So she makes sure actually we get punished, And but if one is very sincere, despite all the obstacles, if we actually try to chant, as Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, any reason, whatever stage you are going through, whatever difficulty you are going through, even if you can't focus on Krishna's name, still you chant, So that sincerity has to be there, So one has to actually, even at the very, means I don't know, I am not an advanced devotee, but what I heard, you have to actually make sure you get rid of all these envious, envious propensities, to criticize someone or create difficulties for somebody, and try to talk behind the back, as I said. All these things will actually keep us away from Krishna, and that will affect our chanting. So that is what I realized, Prabhuji, on the mental platform. So is that answer your question, Prabhuji?
That's perfect, Prabhu. That's exactly what I wanted to understand. So, what basically you have touched upon this subtle body, mind, and the ego, that envious
Yeah.
side of it. And these are the biggest granthi which we have to cut through.
Yeah.
And these are the biggest challenge. And obviously, you talked about intelligence also. So, yes, exactly this is what I was looking for. Thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Shital Prabhu. Thank you very much for your nice class today and for nice realizations. This 5 to 6 class is basically technically it is not for new people. It is for advanced class. At the same time, it is for also because then all these people who are giving the classes were also new. Even I was new, and I am new. So it is one way where it is not for you. Second way is for you, and generally we should keep it as the next class. Not now the beginners class, but somehow it will happen this way, So that's where we are. And we would encourage all the devotees who are with us to participate in this class also. And especially for the new, it will be the next class, which will be from 6 to 7, with interactive discussions too, where most of the questions would be getting clearer step by step with it. Okay, thank you very much, Shriprabhu. So now we will disconnect our YouTube channel and connect in few seconds. So those of you who are with us in YouTube can just hold off, please. We'll give you a new link very soon. And others, if you can show yourself, if you can, that'll be wonderful. Just keep yourself live for now. Thank you very much. Jai Shri Gurudev ki Jai. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Hare Krishna. Krishnadas, can you please sing?